For more here, let's bring in Washington Post political reporter Jenna Johnson. And I know, Jenna, you were listening along with me. What'd you make of these remarks from the president?
To hear the president talk about religion, he talked about how he was raised in a church household, but as an adult, religion hasn't been a huge part of his life. He's gone to church occasionally, but when he was out on the campaign trail, he often stumbled when talking about religion, just because it's not quite as core of a part of his life as it is for a lot of the people who voted for him. And so I think that's why we saw him making that joke towards the beginning about praying for Arnold Schwarzenegger. But also, it's important to remember that a lot of evangelical Christians and a lot of people for whom religion is a core part of their life voted for him. They like his stances on abortion, on standing up for religious freedom. And even when it comes to this travel ban in blocking people from countries that are heavily Muslim, he's made a lot of comments in the past about different parts of Islam that he disagrees with. Of course, that is debated as to if those parts are really widespread or not. But those are all different things that he hit on in this speech today.
He also spoke of eradicating the Johnson Amendment. What was the significance there?
Yeah, this is something that he's been talking about for a long time. For those who don't know, the Johnson Amendment basically says that leaders of churches cannot take political positions. They cannot endorse candidates because they're tax-exempt organizations. They can't be playing a role politically. The Johnson Amendment has not gotten in the way of a lot of pastors who spoke at Donald Trump's rallies, who made a case for a lot of the issues that Donald Trump was pushing. But this is something that he has said he wants to get rid of. He wants pastors to be able to get up in front of their congregations on Sundays and say, you should go out and vote for Donald Trump. There's a lot of controversy over this, especially since churches are tax-exempt organizations. And there's also a lot of pastors who say, I don't want to have to be in a position to tell my congregation what to do. There should be a separation of church and state.
We also heard a reference to well, the electorate's need not to worry regarding the tough calls that he reportedly has had with some world leaders, although specific world leaders were not referred to. And it speaks to this idea as it regards the reports of the call he had with the Australian Prime Minister and the issues with the rollout of the travel ban he signed this past weekend, that those tasked now with dealing with our allies certainly have their hands full. Rex Tillerson, newly sworn in as Secretary of State, certainly seems to have a full plate now. And I want to begin regarding this warning for Iran. The president says that the country has now officially been put on notice. What do you make of what feels like a vague warning?
Yeah, we're still trying to figure out what exactly that means to be put on warning. He has spoken very critically of Iran for months and months. And again, a lot of people are very surprised by the tone that Donald Trump is taking with a lot of these countries, both in public warnings that he's made and also the really aggressive tone that he's taken in phone calls. During a phone call conversation with the Prime Minister of Australia, a longtime ally of the United States, a very friendly friend to the United States. And Donald Trump ended up cutting that conversation off after just barely halfway through, getting angry at them about a deal to take in some refugees. But this is the image that I think he wants to be presenting to the world. He wants to show people that this is America first and that he's not going to be afraid to go after anyone, even after a friend of the United States like Australia.
And as we are looking here on the screen at those gathered at the State Department waiting to hear from the new leader of the agency, by all accounts, a demoralized department in days recent. Secretary Tillerson is going to be tasked with defending that executive order limiting immigration. This is actually something that I know you spoke to Trump supporters in Maryland about recently. I want to just play a bit of what they had to say to you and get some of your thoughts on the other side.
refugee ban is President Trump's attempt to control the onslaught of violent Muslims.
I once had a lady say to me, if 3 people came to your door and they said, we need help, would you let them in if you were told that one of them might stab you? And then it's like, no, you're not going to let them in.
He is trying to protect us with this ban. So, yeah, I agree with it.
Striking to hear those stories. Certainly, the argument has in fact been made that perhaps the numbers don't support the fears that we hear expressed by those voters. But, you know, Jenna, those are their fears nevertheless.
Exactly. And in a lot of these conversations, I would jump in and say kind of some of these facts to kind of disprove some of the fear that's out there. And they would shake their heads and say, well, I still feel the way that I do. There is great fear out in the country about terrorism. Each time that there's a terrorist attack here in the United States or somewhere overseas, it reinforces that fear. And a lot of people I talked with don't have the exact answer for what they want the president to do, but they want him to do something, and they feel comforted by this travel ban that he has put in place. Even if there are shortcomings with it that were pointed out to them, even if there are things don't quite line up with what they were saying, it still makes them feel better, and they want him to be doing more things like this to just cut off the flow of people who are different into this country.
And it's interesting you use that very specific verb, because we just heard at the National Prayer Breakfast the president speak of the barbarism of terrorists who cut off people's heads. And as he said it, Jenna, his hands were thrust forward, he let it linger, and one wonders, is there a sense, perhaps, especially in your reporting, that there's a strategy here on the part of the administration to weave this into all sort of public remark?
Yes, definitely. Ever since 9/11, there has been great fear in the country. And a lot of politicians have tried to not play off of that, to try to put that in context of what's actually happening. Donald Trump saw that fear was growing out in the country. At some of his early rallies, there would be people in the crowds who would have signs about Muslim refugees, who would shout things out as he was speaking. And if you went on Twitter, you could see all of these fears right there. And he tapped into that. He harnessed that. And he gave them a little bit more ammunition at his rallies and at this prayer breakfast, describing in detail the terrible acts that the Islamic State has carried out, which have been denounced by so many Muslims, and they have said that this has nothing to do with their peaceful religion, but yet the president continues to make these connections and really just kind of stir up that fear that was already out there.
And, there was a tweet that he sent in the initial aftermath after putting the executive order in place, where he referred to the many numbers of Christians in the Middle East who had been executed, and it drew a firestorm, as so many things that come from his Twitter account do, of people saying, but so had proportionately higher numbers of Muslims. Again, is this going to be a line, however fuzzy, that this administration walks between speaking out for religious freedom but then seeming to choose one religion over others?
Yes, and in the executive order, it actually says that preference will be given to refugees who say that they've been persecuted for their religion, as long as that religion is a minority in these countries. Well, in all of these countries, Christianity is the minority there. And this is an example that a lot of people can point to as what they're doing to help the refugee situation. I talked to a lot of people, not just in Maryland, but across the country, who have said, I'm really not comfortable with refugees coming into the country, but I'm willing to help Christian refugees because they really are being persecuted. This is a really difficult line, and this is one that has really worried a lot of people, especially those who work with refugees in saying we should not be making decisions based on religion. We should be making them on who needs help.
Certainly much to glean, perhaps, then, from the president's remarks again today at the National Prayer Breakfast. Jenna Johnson of the Washington Post, very much appreciate the time and the insight, Jenna.
Of course, thank you.